March 8, 2014. A Boeing 777 Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370, carrying 239 passengers and crew, took off from Kuala Lumpur International Airport bound for Beijing. On board were families, business travelers, and holidaymakers. The flight was supposed to last just over 6 hours. But less than an hour after takeoff, the aircraft disappeared from civilian radar screens. No distress signal was sent. No emergency communication was received. It was as if the plane had simply vanished into thin air. What followed became one of the most baffling mysteries in modern aviation. Today, we'll dive deep into the story of MH370, what happened that night, the massive international search that followed, the theories that tried to explain the unexplainable, and the haunting questions that remain unanswered. Flight MH370 took off at 12:41 a.m. local time, piloted by Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, a 53-year-old veteran with more than 18,000 flight hours, and First Officer Farik Abdul Hamid, 27 years old and relatively new to the Boeing 777. The flight's first 40 minutes were uneventful. Air traffic control monitored the aircraft as it climbed to its cruising altitude 35,000 feet. At 1:19 a.m., as the plane approached Vietnamese airspace, the CO pilot calmly said, "Good night, Malaysian 370. It would be the last words anyone ever heard from the cockpit. 2 minutes later, MH370's transponder, the device that communicates the plane, position or radar, stopped transmitting. The aircraft vanished from civilian radar screens. For the next several minutes, silence. No mayday call, no emergency code, just nothing. Although civilian radar had lost the plane, military radar in Malaysia later revealed something astonishing. MH370 had not crashed immediately. Instead, it had turned sharply westward, deviating from its scheduled path to Beijing. It flew back across the Malay Peninsula, passing near Penang, and then turned northwest toward the Andaman Sea. The plane continued flying for nearly an hour, completely off course, with no explanation. Some experts suggested that whoever was controlling the aircraft deliberately avoided radar coverage. Others argued it could have been the result of an electrical failure. But here's the chilling part. While the transponder was off, satellites still received handshakes from the aircraft, automated pings showing it was still in the air. These signals indicated the plane kept flying for nearly 7 more hours after its last contact. When MH370 first went missing, Malaysian authorities launched search operations in the South China Sea, along the original flight path. But as military radar data and satellite pings came to light, the search area shifted dramatically. Dozens of ships, aircraft, and submarines from 26 nations joined the hunt. The search eventually focused on the southern Indian Ocean, one of the most remote and unforgiving places on Earth. Vast stretches of ocean floor were scanned using sonar drones and underwater vehicles. The search became the most expensive in aviation history, costing over $150 million. Yet for months, nothing was found. Families of the missing grew frustrated, accusing governments of incompetence and cover-ups. Finally, in 2015, more than a year later, a wing flaperon washed ashore on Reunion Island, east of Madagascar. Over the next few years, additional fragments of debris were discovered along African coastlines. All were confirmed to belong to MH370. The evidence suggested the plane had ended its flight somewhere in the southern Indian Ocean. But without the black boxes, the cause of the tragedy remained a mystery. Mechanical failure. One of the earliest explanations was that the plane suffered catastrophic mechanical failure. Perhaps a fire or sudden depressurization knocked out communications, and the crew became incapacitated. The aircraft could have continued flying on autopilot until it ran out of fuel and plunged into the ocean. But critics point out, if a fire had occurred, why was there no distress signal? Why did the plane turn so sharply off course instead of attempting an emergency landing? Hijacking. Another theory, hijackers seized control of MH370. In the early days, rumors spread that the plane might have been landed somewhere secretly. Some believed terrorists intended to use the aircraft for another attack, similar to 9/11. But years passed, and no credible group ever claimed responsibility. With debris confirmed in the Indian Ocean, the hijacking theory lost momentum, though some still believe it's possible. Pilot suicide. Perhaps the most controversial theory centers on Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah. Investigators discovered that, on his home flight simulator, he had practiced a route eerily similar to the final suspected path of MH370, a flight into the southern Indian Ocean. Could the captain have intentionally diverted the plane and flown it to its doom in a planned suicide? Supporters of this theory point to the deliberate disabling of communication systems and the unusual flight path. However, friends and family of Captain Zahari strongly deny this. They describe him as a devoted father and an experienced pilot with no signs of instability. The Malaysian government has never officially accepted the pilot suicide theory. Government cover-up or shoot down, conspiracy theories inevitably emerged. Some claim MH370 was accidentally shot down by a military operation and governments covered it up. Others suggest it was secretly taken to a remote base for political or technological reasons. Yet, no evidence has ever supported these claims. Still, the lack of transparency from Malaysian authorities in the early days of the investigation fueled suspicion. A deliberate act, but by whom? The most widely accepted explanation today is that someone on board deliberately diverted the plane. Whether it was the captain, a hijacker, or an unknown third party remains unresolved. For the families of those on board, MH370's disappearance was more than a global mystery. It was a personal tragedy. Many relatives campaigned tirelessly for answers, organizing vigils and pressing governments to continue the search.